Another common sort of theme or finding about loss of consciousness is a breakdown of global connectivity or connection. So one popular recently paradigm is called the Tms Eeg paradigm, devised by this Massimini. Here you give a pulse, TMS pulse at the brain, and then see how the brain reacts. And then just by looking at this, the evoked response in EEG, you can kind of see that wakefulness produces a much more complicated pattern, whereas the stage 1 sleep or non-REM sleep is producing very stereotypic ones. And spatial temporally speaking, the evoked pattern is much more sustained and complicated when you're stimulated when you're awake. But if you're under the non-conscious state, like non-REM sleep, under anesthesia or under the coma and so on, they tend to be very, very simple. And this is supposed to be reflecting the breakdown of the general connectivity across the brain. And frontal and the parietal cortical area is highly connected to each other. And so, maybe the breakdown of these areas are related to loss of, connectivity. That's why you see it probably. And based on this kind of idea, now like 2 years ago, there has been a proposal to generate index called the perturbational complexity index. And their claim is that with this number, which is compressing the result of this thing using the zip algorithm, can discriminate whether you are conscious or not by just doing this experiment and then converting the result into one particular number. And this is all the healthy subjects, and this is the result of all the healthy subjects under the loss of consciousness or under the consciousness. And then you can see very, discrete and separable two clusters for wakefulness and non-REM sleep. And they extended it into coma patients, from coma to minimally conscious patients. And so far, I think they have extended this study into 200 or 300 subjects. Only several percent of the misdiagnosis has been reported. And this misdiagnosis may be related to also the recovery of the vegetative patients and so on. So this may be one of the most reliable and potentially promising index of level of consciousness.
So
yes.
PCI is given by something fMRI.
EEG, Tms Eeg, yes. Yes.
So the global connectivity only about the cerebral cortex?
Yes.
But not like some subcortical region?
No. This is based on all Tms Eeg, and Tms is on the cortex.
Yes.
But to the extent that the EEG reflects some of the subcortical thing, that may be the case.
So this
yes.
index can be divided in the REM sleep and wake.
Yeah, REM is high, and yeah, okay. As long as you're dreaming, that is still ongoing. All right, now I'm going to talk about the contents of consciousness, and most of the time, contents of consciousness can be equated with a traditional philosophical term called qualia, what you are actually experiencing, and so on. And then this is related to the problem, hard problem. When you see stimulus or environment like this, or right now, all the stuff going on in the brain is this electrical pulse, as I explained, and some of this pulse give rise to your conscious experience. And as I have been talking, even the same kind of pulse, if it happens in the cerebellum, it's nothing to do with their consciousness. That's really weird, isn't it? And also, as Melanie would probably show, even some kind of activity pulse recorded in a similar area of the brain, if you are not hitting in the right neuron, again, it doesn't relate to consciousness. It's really weird. Further, weird thing is that all the things, all the sensory experience, like vision and audition and smell, they are very different subjectively, right? But somehow it's all electrical activity. So that the more you know about this fact, it's really weird. Everything converts into electrical activity or synapses, chemical activity, but some of them only becomes available to your consciousness, and some of them give rise to vision. Some of them becomes like smell. Why is it? That's really weird. And according to Chalmers, philosopher, he said that there is no necessity or no logical requirement for this particular neural activity to become this particular conscious contents. You can consider of a different word, logically speaking, that all the red experience you have is switched into blue experience, but you can never notice and so on, because there's no apparent mapping between the activity, neural activity, to the conscious person, and that's called hard problem of consciousness. But recently, and I kind of agreed with this until like 5 or 10 years ago, but recently I started to doubt it. Maybe there is indeed some kind of mapping, one-to-one mapping, or one-to-many possibly. Some particular kind of activity in some connectivity has to give rise to this particular consciousness. And if we can sort of create that kind of catalog of this mapping, then maybe that will result in this dissolution of hard problem. That's what I'm interested right now. And one way of doing it is to reverse this arrow, not to start thinking about neural activity to conscious percept, rather to go from conscious percept and then identify or the essential character of the conscious percept and how that is supported by neural activity. Like in the case of vision and audition, vision has this particular characteristic, and also audition has a particular characteristic, and then each of them has to be supported by different kinds of neural activity and also connectivity, and that's something we can actually study. The same for non-conscious and conscious. Conscious thing has some particular property, and non-conscious has some particular property, and then corresponding property has to be found in the brain. That's the kind of approach that integrated information theory is doing. Okay, this is just a brief introduction to that. All right, so I just briefly mentioned that qual, which is a singular form of a qualia, and I'll just directly show. If you haven't seen this and interested, if you can come to this side, maybe that's better. Some of you might have already seen this. But if you see, fixate, and then without blinking, focus on this yellow dot at the bottom, what happens? Maybe you need to come this side.
Sorry, could you explain?
Okay. Try to fixate, and then don't blink, and then focus on this. But at the same time, pay attention to these dots. What happens? Say that again. What happens?
Disappear.
It disappears. Did everybody get it?
Oh.
I'm not cheating, as you can imagine. And so here, your retina and also the brain actually continuously receives the inputs about this yellow dots constantly. It's really strong signal. And still, you sometimes see it, you sometimes don't. Okay, and when you are seeing it, you can clearly see it, and you only know when it is seen, right? This is subjective seeing it, and I can't tell at the moment, unless I scan it or I record the yellow neuron from your brain or something like that. So this, seeing of the subjective experience is what yellow qualia means. Okay.
And
Yes.
the background.
Background is called a masking or sort of surrounding stimuli.
And that
Yes.
is necessary.
That is necessary to make this illusion very effective. Yes.
But there's lots of forms in which you can have these factors, right?
Yeah. The dots doesn't necessarily need to be there. So like you can change the color of the blue dots and also make a shape into cross. And that is also very effective. And trajectory can be two-dimensional and things like that. But this is one of the very, effective, most effective illusion. Yes.
So are these kind of illusions, are they like designed as like they knew what it was going to happen?
No. This particular one, I know this, first author, Joachim, Joran Bonner. And I asked him many times, how come, you discovered this one, right? And he said he had some different experiment to, program, which is this, blue dots. And then he, by mistake, put this yellow dot. And then he realized that he put the yellow dot, but he doesn't see it. And then, what the hell? And then he actually, made it more formal. Yes.
Is it important that the blue dot should be moving? Because for me, it's working also like this.
Yes, right now it can. But, the frequency and also characteristic of the disappearance is different.
So is this a kind of habituation of the retina?
No. So one thing you can actually try compare is that just fixating here, and then you still see that things disappears. That's probably habituation. But when it's moving, it's much more effective, faster, and then frequency of the thing is different and so on. So each different types of the illusion is caused by different kinds of mechanisms. But that can be studied psychophysically, yes.
Does the effectivity depend on the size of the stimulus?
Yes.
Or, yeah.
Like
to be big?
it can't be big in this case. Like if you fixate here, and if you have fixation and you can hold a blink, then you can see all the things disappear actually. But what you cannot do in this particular case is that directly fixating it and make it disappear. At the phobia, it doesn't disappear. So there are lots of phenomenological stuff you can do with this.
Phobia or attention?
About attention, it's not most likely the direct cause. So if you are very good at observing it, fix it here, and try to attend to left side or right side alternatingly. And then, if you can do it, you can probably see that attended side actually disappear more often.
Yeah.
You see?
Yeah.
So trying to attend to see actually makes it disappear in this case. It's weird enough, but if you believe that attention is for seeing, it is really one big counterexample. And what's your alternative?
Well, I was wondering whether when you're fixating, you still got exogenous attention. That's at that area.
Yeah, so
that's why that one, the first one's not.
That's one possibility, but more likely scenario is that at the phobia, representation of the thing is much more extensive in general. Like within 1 degree of this seeing. In fact, I should cover that, but your primary visual area considers as a one quale, meaning that all the different modalities, including memory and everything, anything that is one shot of experience is potentially a quale. And another one is what I kind of introduced, a particular quale, yellow dot quale, and so on. And this is called narrow sense qualia. So these two things are potentially useful distinction for neuroscientists and psychologists, because in one case from the broad sense qualia argument, this and this situation will be completely different qualia, right? If you are fixating at the center, because one is red dot on the left and another one red dot on the right. But this is not super useful in most of the psychophysical experiments. And if you are talking about the specific qualia of the red, then you can actually talk about narrow sense qualia red is the same here and here. That's one little conceptual distinction. Okay, so then NCC paradigm. Since 90s, the most powerful paradigm for studying the consciousness has been this NCC paradigm. So here, as you saw in this motion-induced blindness, dots illusion, keep the stimulus constant and then observe the reports or conscious contents change, and then try to find a neural activity that correlates only with the perception. And then that subtracts the effects of the stimulus itself. And then Melanie's sort of, teacher, master, actually did champion this, particular paradigm called binocular library, training monkeys to report these things while stimulus is constant. And then found that, depending on the region of the brain, you find a different proportion of neurons that correlates with consciousness. And then, if you read this Dehane's review article, it is all about this kind of project. Present a stimulus that is minimally different between conscious and non-conscious, and then try to see what brain region actually differs between the visible versus invisible. Here is a visible versus invisible, a massive activation for the visible words, and similar for detected audible sound compared to non-detected sound, and so on. This is motor activation as well. If you notice that what you did, then you see a lot of activation. If you don't notice that you did it, you don't see much activation. And then these kind of things led to the proposal, right? And that's probably because this is matched with your property of the B2 neurons, and then constructed from noise. But supposedly, this picture should give rise to really similar activity at the level of the visual cortex, and then maybe you don't notice it. But because of that, can you actually say that unless you notice or pay attention to it, you never experience it? What you actually experience here is probably the same as this one, right? It is called a gist, or some statistical perception outside of periphery. Okay. So before going to that, I'll just break with this statement. So do we perceive more than what we can report? And also, is conscious perception without top-down attention application possible? Is the report always necessary and critical to study consciousness? And introspection, metacognition, critical for experience? These are kind of statements that are very critical, because I think this type of question actually divides the position into behaviorist versus phenomenologist, third-person view versus first-person view, artificial intelligence versus artificial consciousness, and in terms of information, extrinsic or intrinsic, and then report paradigm versus non-report paradigm. And we'll come back later.